students, and I could say it was student driven, and I graduated in 1989. I think a lot of the counter arguments to keeping the colonial are based on a logical fallacy known as a straw man argument, where the opponent, this is what your argument is, which is claiming that the people who support the colonial are supporting colonialism, which means that they would be supporting the motives of a king and their loyal subjects, not those who rebelled against them.
You have 1 minute left.
I ask you to reconsider your decision to avoid future embarrassment of the school committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other names? Do you, Peter? Then we will move on to your update.
So good evening, everyone. I just have a couple of items for you. Actually, I'll add a third just as an update. I know you received the communication we sent out to families. There was a really significant accident on the train tracks right next to the school today. It did result in a pedestrian losing their life. The person was not a student or one of the parents in our school community. So we don't have a lot of details as to what might have been, other than we were told it's not a student. So, I think everyone's kind of trying to await a little bit more information on that. I do want to credit, the Gates administration and all of the staff for the flexibility. As soon as this took place and we learned about it, they ended up emptying the classrooms and bringing the students to alternate locations. The custodian was wonderful. They actually brought desks into spaces that didn't have desks to make it ready for students so they could go in. They rerouted buses. They rerouted parent pickup and drop off. On a pretty tight construction site, it's not an easy task. But they did this quickly. They informed parents of what was going on, and I just wanted to make sure I commend the Gates staff for dealing with a very, very challenging situation. And just with the utmost professionalism. So thank you. Nowadays, in inclement weather, just to let you know, tomorrow we're going to be sending out an annual inclement weather notice to families. It is later than it usually is because we're going to really give it some thought and experience what it looks like before we send that out. The biggest change this year to respond to current school circumstances is that in the event we can't hold in-person school for whatever reasons, we're going to move what would have been in person into a synchronous remote working day. So we will still continue to have school, but it will be moving from the in-person day to a remote day. Our leadership thought about this project and carefully weighed the impact of lost in-person school days for the disruption of student learning and the cost of student lose on teaching. So, for example, if, say, for example, we had a snow day on Monday, that student wouldn't actually end up seeing their teacher in person. Felt like losing that teacher contact for a period of time was going to be a real challenge. So we ultimately felt that there was continuity for students by having a cohort move with their teacher virtually. The model also allows for our special education service providers to maintain consistent contact with their students online and not lose up to a week of contact potentially with students because of the technology. If we call an inclement weather day, students who are scheduled to implement asynchronous learning will continue to do so. So asynchronous students on asynchronous days will continue on asynchronous days. Only the students scheduled for in-person instruction will be owned by the teachers that day. And this allows the teachers to face curriculum in a consistent fashion regardless of the impact of the weather. We also recognize the potential loss of power that could play a significant role in students and teachers' ability to work remotely during this type of an event. We are going to be monitoring power outages. That's our new metric, I guess, as part of our decision-making process. Should we determine substantial power, for example, we would call for permission to snow day, and then that day would end up being in-person. It's challenging this year. It's a little bit different. We'll have a more detailed notification before the start. I also want to give you a little bit of an update on the learning model. As you're aware, schools are currently Some of these are advocating that our schools go fully remote, and some of them are advocating that students come back to full in-person learning. While public health measures in the state, region, and in our towns continue to decline rapidly, it's been very encouraging that we have not seen this translate into cases of in-school transmission. We were worried about a couple of our high school cases because the individuals were symptomatic and had been close contacts, but their test results did ultimately come back negative, so the two negatives. We are hopeful that this continues and everyone's adherence to our safety practices will be critical in handling this. Various circumstances around the current situation continue to make decision-making challenging. We recognize that enormous educational and social emotional toll not being fully in school has on many of our students. At the same time, there are significant challenges with regard to public health, maintaining the health and safety of our staff and students. It's our goal to return all of our students to our classrooms, and yet this will not be possible while we continue to experience such high levels of cases in our community, state, and region. We've been greatly encouraged by recent news of the vaccine, and this, along with evolving research on the virus and its transmission, brings me some renewed hope that we will possibly have some type of return for students this year. It does continue to be a quickly evolving situation, and however our teams are going to plan for a full return to school as soon as it's feasible, we really just do not know when most of those happens. There's a lot of information that's evolving, particularly with regard to vaccines, that we need to watch. And we also really need to watch what happens with the public health information over the next few weeks and months. I am incredibly grateful for all of the support our communities provided for our schools during the last 8 months. We also recognize that the current situation is trying everyone's patience. Our teachers and staff have done a wonderful job given significant challenges and have had to learn many new skills. Long term, we want to plan for our students' return to classrooms. It's also important, though, that we continue to improve the model we have now in order to be able to maximize our learning for our students. This is particularly true for the days students are working on remote instruction and remote learning. Our leadership right now is focused on ways that we can help improve the learning opportunities and support our students during that period. There is hope on the horizon for a return to school. Right now, I think that horizon in almost is just on the other side of the surge that we can't quite see. And we're going to, need to weather what we're going through right now before it becomes clearer for us. And again, I just want to thank you and all of our community for the continued patience because, we know this is a very fluid situation and it's challenging for everyone, particularly our students.
Peter, can I just have you clarify, we're talking about a full return, right? Not the high school's return on Monday, correct?
On Monday, high school students are returning in a hybrid model. We hope
to make sure that it was clear if people were listening.
From the day we shut down was to get all of our students back in school. And we're going to continue to work toward that point. I cannot give a timeline for what that's going to look like because there are just too many variables going on that we need to get more information on. It becomes increasingly hopeful. We are seeing better evidence that kids are not the giant spreaders that maybe once thought. That's a good sign. Public health data, on the other hand, is not in a good place right now. And so, we just have some opposing forces that we're trying to navigate the center of.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, a comment. I just wanted to say that, as keen as I am to see everyone back in school, I think Thanksgiving set up for exactly what a lot of people feared that it would, that it did actually kick off another round of infection. And you can see that not only in the Massachusetts Daily Dashboard, but for people who look at the Deer Island County wastewater treatment, it looks exactly the same. And the other point that I wanted to emphasize is that there are a significant number of asymptomatic individuals. So the problem is, you might feel fine, you might have no reason to get tested, you might fill out your form and say, okay, I'm good to go to school, I have no symptoms. That doesn't mean that you don't have COVID, and it doesn't mean that you might not be spreading COVID. So as Peter, already noted, it's a little unclear, how different individuals play in COVID spread, but it's critically important as we go through these next few weeks that people behave as though they were infected, because that's what will make the difference, in terms of just super critically important, and this is going to be a hard time, and yeah, everybody needs to know.
Angie, did you have a question?
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Peter, for the update. It's really hot right now. And so, just for the benefit of all the people, so if the numbers spike up, as you said, the community number doesn't go down. Okay. How would the process be? The family be noticed, or is like next day, or should we take the note immediately? How would that work?
You know, I don't think there's any one way that it could work. We're always going to try and give families as much notice as possible for any changes. You know, I think you're not going to see anything in the public health rules that's going to immediately shut us down, I believe. I haven't seen anything that leads me in that direction, where all of a sudden, because it's Thursday, public health numbers come out, and we say we can't go to school on Friday. I don't foresee any situation. Because, in all honesty, the public health numbers we see are actually trailing 14-day averages. So it doesn't mean that there's been any significant changes. So I think it's more likely that if we continue to see, at this point, you know, both of our indicators are in the yellow. And the one area that we're watching closely right now is percent positivity. And we are hearing from our town that the total number of tests being given is consistent, and the number of individuals that are coming back positive is not rising. So we're really watching that percent positivity closely. We were at about 2.5% positive. Published the information last week. If the number of cases doubled, that could put us dangerously close to red. Just because we're a red community doesn't indicate we're automatic shutdown. It's not just a stoplight. We have some other considerations we want to make about what we're seeing for transmission, how many cases are coming into schools, our ability to manage cases, our ability to staff our schools. Those are things that generally we can see coming and we can communicate with families about. The one thing that could result in school being shut down very quickly would be if we had evidence that there was any type of significant transmission between individuals inside the school, and we knew that it was originating in the school. That would cause us to take a very different approach, which is probably the scenario that we're set. So, you know, I didn't mean to give too long of an explanation on that, but I actually think it's a really important topic.
Okay, thank you.
So, great question.
Are there, John, your hand's not up again, so. Okay. Are you ready to move on to your presentation, Peter? Or was that the end of your update?
That was the end of my update.
Excellent. Thank you.
This was a 2-item update.
Well, and this is basically a 2-item school committee meeting. So, you know, you're the star of the whole thing. So, if you want to present your goals, then we're all yours.
Great. So, one thing, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then you can it's a lot harder than a small laptop screen. You're looking at my goals, Melanie? Hopefully.
Yes, we see them.
I'm looking at something with words on it.
Your memo is on the screen.
Great, perfect. So I put this up just for a frame of reference while I talk through. We're not going to do slides tonight because I think it's, you know, from a goal perspective, this is one of the most straightforward rules that we're trying to approach. But I think, you know, this has been a year like no other, and so we've been fairly singularly focused as a leadership team on this idea of being open school. And so the goals that you're going to see really are to try and reflect that reality and to be really purposeful in thinking about the work that we're going to take on this year and make sure that it's targeted to what's actually needed. Because we really, you know, we're limited in terms of the number of different things we can do. And so, you know, I'm only proposing 4 goals this year. Usually I would do 5 for you, which when I was thinking of the goals, we have this draft strategy that we want to actually do, which is one of the goals this year. We're launching that. And what I wanted to do, we've already started some of the work in that because we've done some of the strategy. So we didn't pause it. We actually wanted to continue that, and you're going to see that reflected in the goals. And then, in addition, there were a couple things that we just have to do as a district. One of those is to finish the district strategy, and then we're also about to have significant transition of the leadership team. So I'm going to go down and go through the goals, and my hope tonight is to hear some feedback from you about the goals and be able to bring that back, revise them over the course of the next week or so, and then, once I get some feedback from you and finalize kind of goal language at that point, I'll be adding some action steps so you know kind of what to expect to see from the course of the week. What I wanted to do, though, in order to give you a little bit deeper sense of my thinking around the goal, I did put some crosswalk action steps. These are the discussion points because based on the feedback tonight, I may amend some of the goals. So I didn't want to finalize action steps and then give you a set of proposed goals because at that point it's kind of moot when I'm not really discussing them and I'm getting feedback. So the intention here is to put some possible action steps to clarify, but not feel like you were tied into a particular. So, 4 goals for this year. The student learning goal I'm proposing is actually tied into our long-range strategic plan, and it's actually an item I added to the plan with a focus area on engagement. And so the goal we added this year is to support educators and families to implement strategies to increase student engagement with either synchronous or asynchronous instructional practices. That is something our leadership team has been focusing on since the beginning of the year. We're going to be focused on it right through the end of the year as well. And so just a couple of those are some action steps, and some of these are already underway. But professional learning that we're providing to our educators and leaders around effective synchronous and asynchronous learning. I have been working with the leadership team and our principals to actually look at student work that's being produced, particularly on the asynchronous days, because that's really the biggest area for us as a district. Supports that were provided to teachers around synchronous and asynchronous learning strategies. And coaches and coordinators have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to try and provide support to our educators. So really this first goal is about maximizing the model that we have, and because I think that by focusing on asynchronous instructional strategies, it really makes us think about a level of clarity in instruction that when students are there, we don't necessarily have to be as explicit about because the teacher understands it. And when the students are at home, there has to be a level of clarity to that so the students feel like they're getting family member support. So I think this is a really, effective goal not only for this year, but because I think it will also help with instruction. I didn't give the action steps around families, but we did produce the family guide to help support students around remote instruction. And we also want to be thinking over the course of the year how we can engage families and how we better support the learning goals for District 10. I think more than what we've ever had, just in our careers, families are as important in many ways as our educators in developing their instructional plans. We want to be thinking about that as well as a district. That's why we're focusing on some of those areas. Professional practice one is to engage stakeholders to better understand the diverse student and family experiences in the district related to culture, beliefs, race and racism, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual identity, disability, language, and anything else that really create more equitable and inclusive schools. This is also right from that draft long-range strategic plan. So some of the possible action steps would be the DEI family advisory work. We have an educator affinity group right now that we can get feedback from. We have also talked about doing some focus groups. We're working extensively on our hiring processes and making sure that our hiring committees across the district reflect the diversity of the district in many something that I think we want to really think about how we can spend the year listening to stakeholders as we go through the second half of this year. Just the goals, there's two of them. One is to work with the school committee and leadership team to refine and finalize the multi-year district strategy to incorporate key learning opportunities for our students. So this is, it's basically an acknowledgement that we had a draft strategy, but if we hadn't shut down the numbers, we probably would have done by the end of last year. And it would be this year we would have been working it into school improvement plans across the district. However, we shut down in March, and the world changed on us very quickly. It's been incredibly challenging, but we also have a huge opportunity to try and get off the dance floor and get onto the balcony and look at what's been happening over the last 6 to 8 months. And even though it's been hard, there's also been a lot that's come out of this that we probably want to be able to lean into and use to improve our district. And so what I'd like to do is we finalize our long-term strategic plan. I actually want to spend a little bit of time engaging with our stakeholders to think about what we want to take with us out of this pandemic, and then using that to help inform our last revision of the district strategy. At that point, I would like to have the school committee vote that this year, and so that principals can begin to align their school improvement plans with that long-term strategy. And that's really one of the big goals this year for the district. The last goal is to engage broad representative group of stakeholders in the planning board to support successful leadership transitions in special education and preschool. These are big positions within the school district to be changing, and in addition to just the areas of obvious influence that they have, a high school principal and a special education director, extremely critical roles within the school district. They're also very critical members of the leadership team that have brought a lot of experience in district to help our work. And so we need to think about making sure that we have effective hiring practices in place, engaging stakeholders through that process. We have to make sure that once we do hire them, there's an effective transition process, and that we are really supporting these new members that come to our community, learn about our schools, in order to help us continue to grow. And then we also have to think about how we transition our current district leadership team, kind of this new version of the district leadership team, as well as think about the impact that the pandemic has had on leadership and try and think about how we can come out of the pandemic and bring in new people and have a really high functioning leadership team as we go forward. So that is, in a nutshell, what I'm hoping to do over the course of this year. The last page of the memo is just that very, very draft version of the strategy with words I write. We want to work on this with you this year, and again, I want to reiterate, this is not a one-year document, it's a one-page document, but this probably represents about 5 years worth of work. And the two goals that I'm choosing this year are the two that I have. That's not going to help it go forward as we see strong. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and welcome some feedback. The idea, by the way, is that this will come back to you 2 weeks from tonight for you to vote as a public voice for the school. And then at the end of the year, when you evaluate me, you actually evaluate, a large part of the evaluation is the progress that we've made.
Thank you, Peter, for highlighting how that all ties together, because I think it's important with so many new members to understand how to see the forest for the trees, right? This is one piece, and to understand how this fits into our what we're supposed to do this year, and what one of our major jobs is to evaluate you. So I appreciate that. Angie, did you have a question or comments?
Yes, yes. I thought Diane raised her hand before me.
I thought she did too, and then she took it off. And then she just put it back on. So you guys can duke it out. I don't really care which one of you goes first. But I saw her name too, Angie, but then she took it down, so I thought maybe she changed her mind. Go ahead, Angie. That's fine. Go on, Diane.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Peter. It's a challenging time. So this actually, I want to talk a little bit about, because in your goal, one of the goals you mentioned about goal, which is stated that diversity involves culture, belief, racism, socioeconomic status, gender, and sexual identity, disability, language, and more. So, I guess the question I have is, when you're thinking about this, when we're talking about, our goal is build diversity, our goal is build inclusiveness. So, is it like the black and white rules that based on all these factors that how we gonna define the future diversity, or it's more our own focus on we really want to build the varieties and that will constitute the spirit of diversity.
Well, I'm just trying to think of how I get into that. I think, diversity isn't something that we can control. Any sample of people or anything is by nature at some point diverse. We can't control diversity. We can't increase its diversity. We can't decrease its diversity. That's not a piece of what we work on. But what we try and focus on is thinking about understanding the diversity of our community and understanding how our schools can be inclusive to people from different backgrounds, different belief systems, and because ultimately we're here to serve each student who comes through the doors. And our goal in understanding our stakeholders is to be able to create schools that can respond most effectively to each other.
So Angie, I know you didn't ask me the question, you asked Peter the question, but one thing that I'm not sure, did you go to when we had the MASC conference and there was the speaker, someone help me with his name, I feel like it was Derek something. And
Yeah.
yes. And so that's really stuck with me as sort of a guiding conversation about diversity, and it wasn't the way that I had thought about diversity before, which is diversity is really just the diversity of thought, the diversity of experience, and not tied to a particular group or a particular thought process or whatever. But just to share with you, that's how, since listening to that keynote address, that's how I think about diversity. I mean, obviously something we can discuss as a committee further, but I just wanted to share that because it makes me think. Well, whenever we talk about diversity, I think about that keynote speaker because he really shifted my thinking around diversity and how I think I used to, for anyone who didn't see that keynote, he speaks eloquently about how most people think diversity is anything that is not white, Christian, straight, the larger groups of the things that represent majorities in our community, and so he just has a whole conversation about how what diversity really means, that you can have two white men standing next to each other and they have complete diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and diversity of things that they can bring to the table and they're able to share and whatnot. But Peter wasn't there, and Peter didn't, I don't think, listen to that keynote address or whatever. But as a member of the school committee, I just wanted to share that that's what's in my mind when I'm thinking about diversity. Diane. Diane? Yep, sorry, it just took me a minute to get to mute and lower my hand so I didn't forget. So much to do on Zoom. There it is. So I want to say a few things. The first thing is to reiterate that we do evaluate the superintendent on these goals, so it's important to really engage with them. We're going to be, everyone's going to be looking at very closely at the end of the year, and it's a big deal. So just wanted to say that. So here's just I have a couple of questions. I'll just ask them all, and one comment. So I think the pandemic learning frame of this is really smart. My question is, was it intentional that you chose that not only because of the conditions that we're in right now, but I'm wondering, and I'm wondering, and I'm wondering if you're wondering, what can we carry forward beyond the pandemic and use going forward in the education model here that we have in the district? That's one. I can stop and have you answer, or just ask some of the unfinished work from last year because we did have to shut down on March 13th. One was the student learning goal. In your final update, you very nicely color coded it to highlight what work still had to be done. And on the reading goal, the student learning goal, the updates in June never happened and the fall never happened for obvious and good reasons. But the vision statement was still in draft form and the screening tools are all in flux. It seems like some have been removed and some have been delayed. And I don't know, I just wanted to know what the status of that was, as well as the district, the complete district strategy goal, because we did have the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium take a look at it, and they had made some recommendations, but because of the pandemic, it just everything got messed up. So anyway, I just wanted you to comment on unfinished work from last year. And then the last thing was, I think we've learned a lot about cultural competence in a short time now, in a year. And I wondered if you might add that to your graphic, into the, like, explicitly, like, talk more about cultural competence and what that looks like. And if you and the team were thinking of adding it to the long range strategic plan, so like each idea, or if you think it's just already in there. Thank you for listening to that very long set of questions.
Okay. Great. I think I can get to all of this. Hopefully. So I'm going to save the PS who's responsible for reading pieces here. Information build. But I think one of the first questions was, kind of what would we take with us out of the pandemic? One of the things that I've actually been thinking more and more about doing, just because our staff is already pretty strapped for time over the course of this year, but also because I think it might be a nice deep dive into kind of hearing from a broad range of our stakeholders about what they think should be kept. I was actually thinking about engaging kind of a professional survey firm to help us design some surveys that we might be able to send out to our families, our staff, our students, our leadership over the course of the spring, to kind of let the community get on the balcony a little bit and give us some feedback about, all right, what worked that you think we should try and keep, because we want to learn from that. I think initially there are some interesting ideas, and this is new brainstorm, but I actually think parent conferences are designed, have made conferences accessible to people who might otherwise not be able to access them. They don't have to take time off of work. They don't have to make sure two parents can figure out how to get all work done. And I don't know that every parent conference is always over Zoom, but to be able to provide some flexibility for things like that. Some of our family engagement teams, since we've been doing Zoom, we're getting many, many more parents that participate when we host something on Zoom, as opposed to when we were hosting things in person. I'm actually right in the process now. I don't know if I've got a chance to reach out to Tessa this week, but one of my big things was to schedule the superintendent coffees again at the end of this year on a monthly basis. So we'll be doing those as outreach, but when we're doing things with Zoom with families, more people are able to, and so that might be something. I think, when we started the budget process last year, we, were doing a lot of convincing that bringing Chromebooks to the freshman class for this year could be a really good positive thing for the high school, and that it was going to be a 5-year implementation model, and we would have to really, think about how I can get that up over the course of 5 years. And lo and behold, 3 months later, we were just bringing Chromebooks to the school, and we really had to accelerate that process. That stuff doesn't go away, and that's going to be able to impact teaching and learning for a long time. I think some of the ways we've been able to think about how we engage parents as partners in student learning, how we're going to be able to do that over the course of the year, could be something that we can also utilize long term. I don't want to keep going, but those are some of the initial ideas about the way I think probably come out of this, and at least what our team has already initially talked about, because it's not just me. Role that time plays in my thinking we knew coming into the year we wouldn't be able to do a lot of things, but we knew we had to think about the quality of education that our students got during the pandemic, and how we could improve student learning continually. And we knew that we had committed to really thinking deeply about, diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to our students. With this about pretty much something we all love. It's just a matter of photographing moving forward. The district strategy was another thing that was a piece of unfinished business that year. So my thinking around that was to do that. But rather than just trying to quickly finalize it, we have, probably as frustrating as it is for everyone, it's probably also the greatest period in education innovation in the last 100 years going on right now. Not because we all wanted it to happen this way, but just out of necessity. And so, why wouldn't we pause and think about how we incorporate that in our business strategy before we really launch it next year? In terms of the student, one item that we really need to be looking at, in terms of the reading from last year. But in terms of cultural competence, I think, it's interesting. One thing we've been talking about and would have been doing this year had the pandemic not struck is thinking about maybe partnering with an organization I call Fortunate Graduate to really think big picture about skills and competencies that we want our students to have. And it's very interesting because I know Deb and I have had, Don and I have had, we've all had conversations of cultural competence is probably one of the big skills that we want students to come out of our schools with. So I don't know what the final wording would be on something like that. That was certainly on the radar in terms of what we're doing. And then finally, to get to the reading piece, next meeting, we are doing a presentation with the school committee to update you on the progress that's been done. So you will get that at the next meeting. Deb and her team have been working hard on getting the scenes ready. Did I get to all of those?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Sure.
Adam?
Thanks. And thanks, Peter, for the memo. It was good to be able to sort of do that in advance. I really appreciate the addition of families into the student learning goal. I think this year more than any, our families are far more engaged in our student learning than maybe they've had the opportunity in the past. And I also feel that sort of the pragmatism around the additional district goals is really well suited. My question really is around the professional practice goal. And as I read that and I referred then to the draft table of the district strategy, I wondered if you could sort of explain some more why you chose item 2.1 versus item 3.1, which is equitable opportunities and outcomes in establishing and challenging students to achieve at high levels to be engaged in their learning by increasing access and opportunities for low-income, Latinx, Black, and special education students, as well as English learners. And the reason I think that these are somewhat sort of refer back to each other, 3.1 and 2.1. But I guess my question is, in this particularly challenging year where outcomes are going to be, and the ability to have equitable outcomes across such a diverse group of students in a very challenging year, why you chose the inclusive practice part of this versus the outcome part of this?
Sure. So, the first thing I would say is because we had choose to codify something before doesn't exclude us from working on other areas of our own district work. So, for example, in terms of thinking about equitable outcomes, we actually just finished with the first ever district-wide diagnostic system using one universal diagnostic test for all of our students from K through grade 8. And that was something that we've never had in places of district. Schools use diagnostic assessments often and screenings, but we didn't have one consistent platform that we could use. So we actually just finished administering that this fall, and we have been working through training our curriculum coordinators and coaches to analyze that data. And we just did another round of training with all of our principals and assistant superintendents and specialists to be able to really look at that student data. So it's not exclusive that we're not doing that. I think the reason that I chose to focus on stakeholder engagement first is I think at the heart of it, listening to people's voices and using those voices to help us improve. I didn't want to skip the step of listening to people first, and then make suppositions that we might know better about what we think people need. So I always think that you need to start with listening, and then you go from there. So I think that was my own.
I think that does make sense. I appreciate the clarity. I think it might be helpful in that some of the action steps to include some of the inclusive practices as part of the engagement, so that there is at least some time to the outcome side of this for our students as part of the engagement.
Yeah, and I guess it also has to do a little bit probably with the wording and the category of role, whereas the first one is focused on student learning. Professional practice is actually generally focused on the practice of the school and what that person is doing. So it's a little bit different. I think I wanted to, I think my focus is more on the student outcomes on the school. I would maybe move it up into the student learning role category. Does that make sense?
It does.
Kira?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first is I'd love to know a little more about how our students with special needs and the families that love to support them are included in goals 1.5 and 2.5. And I'd also like to know more about how the echoes of our current economic crisis and the economic upheaval that some of our families, many of our families, are experiencing right now, how the echoes of that disruption are going to fold into a multi-year plan. And you don't have to give specifics on that tonight, but perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about how you're integrating that thinking into your goal setting when you get specific with us in the next 2 weeks.
Anytime I get more than one question, I have to make sure I write it down. All right, so in terms of, and I'm just breaking it back into two pieces. I think in terms of how we're listening, I think, we have different mechanisms that are already in place as a district to try and listen to different groups. We've had a CPAC for a long time that offers us an opportunity to kind of hear in a coordinated way from families of students with disabilities. So for example, CPAC is on the highway for the special education director. There are also opportunities for other families of students with disabilities to be able to serve on that committee as well, to make sure that we're incorporating a lot of family voice in that process. And then in terms of the high school principal search, there's a screening committee, but then as we do stakeholder groups, that provides an opportunity to bring in different stakeholders with different voices to be able to and think about that. So it's different groups for different individuals and different roles. And then I think in terms of soliciting feedback, I think that's certainly something that we have an opportunity if we want to do some surveys to be able to incorporate. Parents can always pick the various lenses that they feel like they want to participate in and give feedback through, so that we can understand kind of different people's experiences intersect based on their background and how they're experiencing schools. And then again, I think one thing we've talked about doing in this plan is maybe doing some focus groups. I think those throughout the year. We haven't determined what those look like yet because we wanted to get a sense of the committee felt that our goals first before we put action steps in. And I think there's some opportunity.
Does that answer your question, Kira?
Yeah, and there was a second part, sorry, that's why I wrote it down. The second part was, how would we incorporate some of the disruption into the long-range strategic plan? I think, well, first I can actually say, 1.5, which is one of the something that we added as a leadership team this year because we recognized that this was the critical work and it was actually about student engagement and thinking about our engagement, but then also growing it to include the goals. So I don't have real specifics because I think that's what we need to do.
Kara, did that do it? Good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Kevin?
Thank you, Peter. This is the first time I saw your strategic goals, so I learned a lot. So since Tessa and Diane mentioned this is going to be used to evaluate superintendent's progress. So I just totally from the evaluation purpose, obviously it would be nice if the goals are more accountable or more specific to be measured. I would say, let me say here, so I from my reading is that I see four purposes, right? So it's to increase student engagement. Second is to create a more equitable, inclusive school. Third one is to refine and finalize 40-year strategic. And another one, right? So and another one is hiring. Right? So to me, I would say increase student engagement. That's really hard to measure. So if I was asked, so say next year, when I look at this, say, is it Peter doing well to improve this increase student engagement? I don't know how to measure. How to measure it? Do you see what I mean? So that's one, my comments. So second is also my feeling, some of the goals are not goals. I mean, not the ultimate goal. For example, there is already some another goal behind the increased student engagement. What is the purpose of increased student engagement? I would say increase the student engagement is a tool. So basically, there's still a goal behind that. So maybe some more quantifiable or measurable goals for that part. So another part I would say maybe because right now, like Deborah mentioned, so due to the pandemic, this year the student has some we have to trade off deal with the situation. So some of the students probably won't be able to make as much progress as fully in-person learning. So if we say at some point in the next year we're going to be able to do in-person learning, can we think about something like how to mitigate the aftermath of the pandemic and to help the students catch up? Because right now I would say my impression is that a lot of students will be not as a little bit behind compared to the in-person. So that's also I would say less concern. That's all. I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for the last one, are you thinking for next year?
I don't know. It depends on when we are going to return to the school in person.
Right. I think, we're certainly going to be planning for how to, look at some of those gaps in student learning that arise as a result of the pandemic. One thing we are going to be looking at and have already started to do over the course of this year is thinking about our child study processes at some of the different schools, actually all of the elementary schools, and really thinking about how utilize some of the advantages. We already have a lot of student work that's generated in schools. Teachers have an opportunity to look at in teams and think about how we can continue to support students in the general education classroom and with other types of supports. But now we also have an opportunity to think about how we can incorporate some of these diagnostic results that come in to supplement thinking. And one thing I would like to see us do is think about ways to become more consistent in some of those processes at each school, because I think it's one thing to think about it at the district level, but the actual impact on students is going to happen in a teacher's classroom, when teachers have an opportunity to think deeply about the type of work students are producing, and really personalize the types of supports students need. We're happy to come back to you and maybe give kind of, I'm thinking, out loud for Deb to give it back, not for the spot, but maybe come back to you as we progress through the year and give a little overview of the new assessment tool we've been using, because I think that might help explain something like that around, helping to know more about our students and different learning needs that students have.
Peter, do you mind if I chime in for a second just about in terms of our role as school committee and how your evaluation goes? Because I recognize 100% that Yevon is one of our new members, and what will happen, Yevon, once Peter receives this feedback and comes to us in 2 weeks with some finalized goals, what I will also do is do a little bit of a presentation sort of on the expectation of how, like, the superintendent's process of assessing his goals and doing an end of the year. I'm sorry, I'm like totally at a loss for words. But when we give his review at the end of the year, it's one of those things where there is a very there's a process that the school committee goes through, and there's a number of things that you look for. One of the frustrating things about the actual process that is set up for reviewing the superintendent is that a lot of the things are things that we wouldn't actually see as school committee members because they're not part of our purview. So when you're asking questions about, like, how will we measure student engagement, traditionally superintendents will provide some evidence towards the end of things that he's maybe shared throughout the year. So when we're going into that review process and we're thinking about the different information that we have in order to write his review, he will bring up, like, oh, we had that reading presentation, and that speaks to things that we did here. I'm just giving totally random examples, but one of our jobs as school committee members, which if we were having a normal year and you were having a normal induction process and you would go through all of the normal professional development and learning that school committee members go through, what we would talk about, and what I'll touch on a little bit before our next meeting when we're looking to approve Peter's goals, is just that there is, Peter is extraordinarily good at noting when there is evidence that supports one of his goals. And so as we go throughout the year and we hear different presentations and we're looking at the different years and workings of the school district and how things work together, it's important as a school committee member to kind of take note. Does this have anything to do with student engagement? Does this presentation speak to that? Does this survey give us evidence of things that, there's different things that the district and Peter are going to present to us and other members of the, leadership team, but just as school committee members, it's sort of on us to kind of collect evidence throughout the year. And as I said, Peter's extraordinarily good at providing evidence once we get to that point of review and when we're doing the whole thing. But just as a background, just so you know, there are a lot of things that are part of this standard form that we have to fill out that are not necessarily things that we may have a direct insight into, because we don't have operations as part of our purview, and so it's one of those frustrations and something that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm sure that any school committee member who has been through this process can speak to that, because there's things that you'll see as items that you about Peter that have to do with like staff and how, they respond to, the initiatives that he's put forward. Well, we're not expected to go and we're not supposed to go talk to staff about what they think about Peter. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between the form of how we are supposed to evaluate him and the goals that he puts forward and how we interpret them, but they're more like a guiding principle for how we view the different things that come before us as a school committee to see if they're checking the boxes of things that Peter indicated are things that he wants, to work on in the district. Does that make sense? Or give you a little bit more context?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for your explanation. I would say, I'm sure Peter is going to provide a tremendous amount of data to support, right, by that time, so to help us understand the progress. So yeah, that's good. So then I have a second comment is that I feel like the increasing engagement is kind of a tool, a way to lead to somewhere. Right? It's kind of a so I feel this is not ultimate. Why? So maybe just why? Maybe it's intermediate. Why do you choose this?
So this actually, this is probably a better long conversation too, because this actually goes into historically the focus of the district and its core values around engagement. Because I think if you go back several years and you can watch, some of the school committee meetings from then, one of the things we saw is we partnered with Challenge Success for a few years, and it's an organization that is focused, primarily for high performing districts that are also experiencing a lot of stress around learning. And they did some student surveys for us, and one of the striking things that we noticed was that our students were, I think the quote was doing school. And what the survey really looked at and told us was that the students were compliant in getting work done, but they weren't passionate about the work that they're doing. I don't know how else to say that if that's a fair way of summarizing it for everyone. And ultimately what we want to do is increase student learning, but as I develop that goal, right, and increase student learning, I think everyone in the world would want to increase student learning. But I want to make sure we're thinking about what the biggest lever our school district can do to push on student learning. And so that's the reason I think we wanted to get into that deeper level of specificity around student engagement, because I think schools have not changed the way society has changed over the last 50 years or so. And what we're seeing in terms of how students engage and the types of thinking they're doing and the type of work that they're doing, we need to try ultimately to make that thinking and that work more commonplace in schools, rather than schools kind of having operated the way they have for 50 or 75 years. And then kids, graduate college, and now all of a sudden real life starts, and real thinking and real work starts. We need to bring some of that. Engagement is more of an intermediary step, but we want to focus on that because it's the area that's specific enough to the need to be effective. Is that? Yeah, I'm happy to share and dig up some of those surveys for you. To say something.
John?
Sorry about that. My landline was ringing, and I didn't think anybody really wanted to listen to that while we spoke. I think I want to touch on some of the topics that Evan was bringing up, but just in a little bit different way. Like everybody involved in education, I lust after a longitudinal summative tool which really aligns with student learning. So we could, in fact, look at our progress as a district and say, aha, we have the evidence. Here it is, by student over time, and know that we're making last year is, clearly a mess or nothing this year. And, you mentioned, Peter, that, we're starting to develop our own internal tools. So I think that because in the end, what we want to do is to make sure that student outcomes are good. Everything that we talk about ultimately needs to wind up there. And ideally, we would like to measure something there. So, as I look at the goals, and again, as I think already been commented by others, I think there are things that we believe that if we do them, it is plausible that they will improve student outcomes. And in some cases, I think you could point to, stronger evidence from other work people have done that said, see, it actually worked over here. So now that we've done that same thing over here, the expectation should be the same. But I think it's important that the goals and the strategies not stop with we are going to increase student engagement, but it continues to complete the sentence, with the idea that, and if we do this, this is the reason that we expect student outcomes will be improved, and ideally, this is what we will measure to show that student outcomes will be improved. And I think the other thing that I wanted to comment in general is that I am fully schizophrenic with respect to all of this progress towards goals. There's a part of me that is desperately trying to find, something to measure all the time so that we can say, see, we measured it, this is actually getting better. And there's part of me that knows that that's a fool's errand because there are a whole bunch of things that I care about, my curiosity, that we're going to struggle to measure, at least in the foreseeable future. So, but I hope that we as an educational community can sort of embrace that dilemma and both, lust after quantitative tools while at the same time, embracing some of the soft things that come back out of it. And then the last point that I wanted to make is when we talk about engaging all stakeholders, I think I would be remiss if I didn't note that I think that there are some stakeholders who believe that in the context of the colonial name, we, as an administration and as a school committee, did not successfully engage all stakeholders. So that's not a comment about the outcome of the discussion. That's a comment about the process.
Yeah, no, John, I'll comment on that last note first. I think, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, I've been having these kind of conversations to try and process it with our leadership team is how do we, I think we have a lot of people in our community who are kind of supportive of the overall efforts and idea of, doing a better job at being more inclusive as a community and being more inclusive as a school, but maybe just have questions about, well, why that or why this. And I did pick up during, some of the dialogue after the formal discussion that I think there's some people who want to know more and would like to know about this more deeply, but also are not comfortable asking any questions and engaging with it. And so I've been thinking about how do we maybe do some things to outreach with our community around getting a broader conversation going in a way that's kind of safe to have that conversation, where if people don't understand, we can help create dialogue around it. I don't have an answer to that because our society is struggling with that right now, to be honest. And if we solve it, we're going to go. But I do think there's some things we can do as we head through the spring, and that's been one of my goals as a piece of this, is to think about kind of outreach to the community and do some moving of some of the divide and wound that has come out of this. So that's definitely on my mind, and I want to acknowledge that that's something we're thinking about. The piece about longitudinal data, I think you summed that up. We haven't had our own internal data that's been consistent school to school as a district, and this is something that's giving us that first insight into it. So I think that's something that but we have to do kind of that first year baseline to establish it. In all honesty, I would love to have had 3 or 4 years prior baseline data to really deeply understand because impact on this. We all start before we're starting place. I also don't ever want to process is really outlined the roles. So, not everything we do is going to all be quantifiable in that regard, and I know, I think that's different than what you're saying. But I just want to point that out.
Laura?
I was trying to mentally go back in time before the pandemic hit and thinking about all the things that you were working on with your goals, before that. And I remember that one of the things that you were really doing a lot of work on at the district level was around the social emotional learning. We had a review of the social emotional learning programs, and I'm also thinking about how that's been such an important emphasis at the different schools during the pandemic is really paying attention to students' social emotional needs. And so I guess I would love to see that highlighted a bit more in the goals that you've chosen to sort of highlight, just because I think it is something that's been the focus of attention for the district and for principals and teachers. And also sort of for continuity's sake, I guess it felt like something that you were really focusing on and making a lot of progress with before March 13th came. I had a couple other questions. One of them is more sort of a detailed question, and that was around action steps for I think 1.5. It was around the school improvement plans, and I remember that we had discussed last year, again before the pandemic hit, about maybe aligning the school improvement plans so that as a school committee it's easier, for us to look at and review and sort of process all of that wealth of information that comes in. And my first year on school committee, I was just struck by how disparate all of the plans were and how hard it was to kind of compare, make sense of what goals were and what's actually going on. So I didn't know if that was more of sort of a concrete action step that you talked about before, is trying to bring a little bit more uniformity to those to make them more useful for us in terms of reviewing.
So, first I appreciate the feedback on the SEL piece. I'll take that back and think about, what we might be able to do with that. In terms of, school improvement plans, yeah, that's an action item, but it's an action item that has to kind of happen after we finalize the strategy, because there's nothing to align them to yet. I think all of the schools this year will all work with a similar thing. I know elementary principals meet together regularly without me. I meet with the elementary principals regularly. We're looking at student work together. So, there's a real focus to that. But, I think in terms of aligning the school improvement plans until we have that district strategy, doesn't make a lot of sense to steer in that direction. But that is something that coming out of this, we will look at, not only the format, but thinking about, how do we align with similar goals in what we're working on. And it doesn't mean each school also won't have personalized goals, but, I think, one of the things, my favorite analogy is a rowboat in a river, that you need to make sure that, everyone's rowing in the same direction. And I always say the first step is you have to make sure we're all in the same river, before we then head in the same direction. And so I think, the piece about having a really good concrete strategy going forward is, as a district, when we set some annual goals, those bleed through with all of our school improvement plans, and then individual schools also think about their own individual community and ways that they also enhance more personalized and the school. So there's a lot of that that goes with it. That's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Ask one more.
Yes, you can, quickly. We're like 22 minutes behind, almost 45 minutes behind where we thought we were.
Okay.
So go right ahead.
Say it fast. Diane mentioned something similar to what I was thinking, and that was in the goal that you have focusing on COVID practices and sort of best practices during our current situation. I was also wondering about what goals and sort of learning
Yeah, I mean, you know, and we'll talk about this more over the course of the year, and we'll get everyone talking about it. But I think, one example of something that has moved forward is a move to a Western. And, we're still technically in a pilot year, but nearly all of our schools are piloting that with the intention that if it's working well, that will continue to be at all of our schools. And so, that's something that I think we'll carry with us. And one of the benefits of what we're doing with that is our coaches and coordinators, because we know how difficult this is for all of the teachers this year, our coaches and coordinators have actually been developing lessons that teachers across the district can use and implement in classrooms, as well as resources, strategies, and tools. So it's bringing a level of consistency with some of that work that we haven't necessarily seen. And I'm not someone who thinks that every single thing we do needs to be consistent, but there are some key areas of learning that we need to think about are so critical for students as they progress through the system that we need some consistent experiences. Literacy is certainly one, mathematics is certainly one, and I would actually advocate that social emotional learning is one. And that includes our work around cultural competence, to go back to that term. Because as kids progress through the system, they end up feeding into one junior high school and one high school. And if people are coming from such vastly different experiences that they are missing elements that the schools are not, then we have to think about how we bridge that. So that's kind of, I think, something on the curricular side of what now is some of that increased consistency, but I think it's actually happening more naturally now because of the pandemic, because the resources are consistent.
All right, Adeline, you appear to be the last school committee member with your hand raised, and then we do have one attendee.
Thank you for sharing your goals with us. But I wanted to go back to Yevin's comments about measurable goals. I think that as I think about your goals and I did look at them and I think that for the benefit of the school committee and yourself, I think we need some tactical goals in addition to your goals to be able to measure them because although they're fantastic goals and every one of them resonates with me and I'm sure with other school committee members, they're a little bit too abstract for us to go and say, okay, so we're gonna increase diversity, we're gonna hire school committee, we're gonna hire diverse staff. But how many diverse staff? We're going to increase community engagement by doing what? I think that when Yevon was talking, I was thinking about it myself, and I thought that maybe if under each goal, and I know it's going to be difficult to do, but under each goal, if you could tell us what each tactic is to achieving that goal, it would help us ultimately to say we achieved goal one, we achieved goal two. And sometimes it's not easy to do, but it's worth spending the time. And I think that you put a lot of effort and time in this district and helping us achieve our goals and achieve the goals we want for our kids. And I think even for your own benefit, I want us to go back next year and say we said we're going to do it, even if we are minimum. We're going to hire one one staff. It doesn't even have to be a teacher, one staff. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And it can be as minimal as that. But that allows us to look at the metrics and go back and tie them to a particular goal and say we achieved them. Or maybe we more than achieved them. I think it's worth the effort doing that, and I know that it probably, and sometimes things are not black and white and they are not quantifiable, but to the extent that we can quantify the goals and put some metrics towards it that we can look at next year and say, well, we were able to achieve this, and if we were not able to achieve it, what should we be doing going forward to achieve achieve those goals, probably will be helpful.
So Evelyn, this is a failing of the school committee chair in a sense because we haven't had this conversation yet. And Peter and I agreed that he would bring his goals forward without those specific things that you're asking for right now because he wanted to have general feedback without feeding it to you. And so you're ahead of the game, right? I mean, Peter, would you agree? Like this is the conversation that you and I had about Peter really wanted to present goals and get your general feedback on the ideas of the goals because when these are presented in 2 weeks, there will be specific action
So I
steps.
have no objection to the goals. I think I am in alignment with each of the goals, but I do that. So maybe I was ahead because I didn't know the context behind.
Or
But
ahead,
I like each of the goals. I think they're on point for the moment in which we are right now. I was more so I thought we had arrived, but I didn't know it was still a journey going to the arrival point. So I'll wait.
but that's okay. It's a good point, and maybe Peter can speak to some of the ideas he had around those specific things. But when he does present his goals officially and we vote on them, there will be sort of action steps associated.
And that will come back 2 weeks from today.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I do want to remind Yevon and Evelyn and Kira that we actually everything has gotten lost within the pandemic 100%. But one of the roles that we assigned at the beginning of the year for school committee was a new member mentor, which is Amy. And so I do think that it would be valuable maybe if Amy could you guys could arrange a time to speak with Amy about some of the stuff around evaluation because it's totally one of the biggest jobs that we do, but also one of the things that is most unfamiliar, I think, in terms of things that you do in your everyday life and something that is sort of a new experience in how you do it. And it is something that's very scripted and, you know, we get a form that has to be filled out. And so there are certainly things that I think that Amy could help anyone who wants a refresher and anyone who's a new member understand around this process. So as I mentioned to Yevon before Peter presents his goals, Beth, take note because I think that I want to be able to provide a little bit of guidance around what our evaluation procedure looks like in the end of the year so that people can be prepared for it and can start taking notes and thinking about how they're going to evaluate the things as they come up throughout the year. That's one of the most difficult parts about being a school committee member is it's not just a subjective kind of like, well, we think Peter did a great job. You know, there are things that he presents throughout the year that support the goals that he puts forward and the action steps that we'll end up seeing in 2 weeks. And so the whole evaluation process does have some real parameters and things that we can pay attention to and that we can take note of and that we can use in terms of the whole process when it comes out at the end of the year. But I do want to remind everyone that Amy did take on that role as mentor, and so maybe Amy can reach out to new members, and if there's anyone else that wants a sort of evaluation review and wants to reach out to Amy, then maybe she can put together a little conversation about what to expect and how what to think, especially before Peter presents them as formalized. So, Peter, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. So we have one attendee, I think Charlie, in the audience was raising his hand.
Charlie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes.
Okay. My comment was actually triggered by something Peter said answering Diane's question many minutes ago. And that's when you mentioned, Peter, hiring some outside firm perhaps to create a survey among all the stakeholders, students, staff, parents. You did not mention the larger community. I think this has been a problem. This is what I want to comment on. the years, I think the schools have become less connected to the general population of towns than it used to be for a variety of reasons. I think it'd be much more helpful for the community to better understand what the school's problems are constantly, not just occasionally, and vice versa for the schools have a better understanding of most of the people living in the community who do not have children in school, which by the way is the majority of their problems are, especially the obvious problems last year. I think there are opportunities to create new relationships where Acton at one point was a leader in doing new and novel things. I think we can do it again. I think much better communication would be beneficial to all. I can get into much more detail, but I'm already running late. But when you think of getting feedback, think of the community, not just the immediate school groups, which is obvious, but the whole community is much more valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, for your thoughts. All right, if no one else has any questions, are you ready to move on, Peter?
Yes.
So, in ongoing business, we have approved minutes of our meeting on November 19th in our packet. Is there a motion to approve them or second discussion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, Amy motion and Adam second. We will do a roll call vote if there's no discussion. Does anyone have discussion? Nope. Okay. Angie?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Ginny? Adam?
Yes.
Kevin? Diane? I'm abstaining, I was not sure. Nora?
Yes.
And me, yes. All right. Beth, that was unanimous except for Diane who abstained because she was not present. Subcommittee and member reports. I know, John, you had an HIT report that you wanted to share.
Thank you. The Acton Health Insurance Trust met this morning to review cash flow, the Q1 Treasurer's report, and the draft audit report for last year. For FY20, the audit showed expenses of $17.5 million, revenues of $16.5 million, for a loss of $930,000. The unrestricted assets reserve of the trust was $5.9 million. Cash flow reported expenses through October for this year were $6.3 million against income of $5.8 million for a loss of $534,000. The projected loss for FY21 remains slightly more than $1 million. COVID claims for members who have tested positive remain low, about 0.6% of total claims. The Treasurer's report for the first quarter of FY21 showed a loss of $770,000 on income of $4.4 million and expenses of $5.2 million, leaving a reserve balance at the end of the first quarter of $5.2 million. Considerable uncertainty remains about members' healthcare utilization during FY21 related to reductions in elective procedures and other COVID-related changes in behavior. The trustees have no information to estimate the impact of COVID vaccination on the expenses of the trust. Cook & Company provided financials over a range of premium increases. The trustees discussed the expected expenses for FY22 and the management of unrestricted assets of the trust. On this basis, the trustees are providing guidance to the school district that healthcare premiums should be expected to rise 5% for FY22. The trustees will vote the actual rate increase at the meeting of 4 February next year. And all of the documents supporting this morning's meeting are on DocuShare on the Town of Acton website.
Thanks, John, for such a thorough and concise update. Adam, did you have a quick budget update?
I did. The budget committee met last Monday. We're still a little early to get solid numbers on it for this year. Still mentioned and really is of interest for the Boxborough community is that given the 3-year rolling average of enrollment, there's going to be a shift of about 0.1% towards Boxborough. Dave tells me that could be a measurable amount to Boxborough. So it's something that the town of Boxborough should be aware of. There was also some great news shared with us about the air purifiers that the district purchased. I wonder maybe if Peter or Dave wants to share that great news.
Dave looks like he's
Dave's pointing. He's trying to get the screen.
No, Dave, go ahead. You're a numbers guy.
It was exciting, and I didn't want to steal Dave's thunder.
That's okay. What would it be? What would a meeting be without Dave?
Anybody want to answer that? In the procurement of the air purifiers, it turns out that the electricity supplier, whose name escapes me right now, Eversource, is providing rebates because these devices are energy efficient. And so I have a number in mind, but what I'm going to say is it looks like the rebate is going to provide us a little over $100,000 on a $270-odd thousand purchase. So very significant amount of money that through JD Head and Kate Crosby's efforts, not mine, not Peter's, but theirs. They came up with this, so it's tremendous news. And on top of that, the air purifiers will improve air quality in the classroom, in all the classrooms in the district.
That's great news. Thank you. Were there any other updates that I don't have listed from subcommittees or liaisons? Okay. Peter, we have a statement of warrants and a recommendation to approve.
I'll read them since John gave such a lovely update on the HIT. So I move that the school committee vote to approve payroll warrant as follows: number P2111 dated 11/19/2020, in the amount of $2,726,538.15. Payroll deduction warrant number 21-011PR dated 11/19/2020, in the amount of $1,113,825.93, and vendor warrant number 21-011 dated 11/25/2020, in the amount of $1,944,079.23.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, then we'll do a roll call vote. Angie?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Evelyn? Amy?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Kevin? Diane?
Yes.
Nora?
Yes.
And me, yes. That passes unanimously. All right, Peter, is there anything in the FYI that you wanted to know?
No.
All right. We have a need for an executive session tonight. I will entertain a motion for an executive session to be convened under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Focus 1, to discuss the reputation, character, or physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or discuss the discipline or dismissal of or complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. This is in regard to the open meeting law complaint dated November 13th, 2020, received from Martin Benson. We will not return to open session at the end of the executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session with no intention of returning to open meeting?
So moved.
Second.
John said it first, is that right? John moved and Ed seconded. Great. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.